During a hospital visit, he saw his ex-wife with twins just like him. What she said next changed everything. "Those babies! Sarah, are they mine?" Marcus Rivera stood frozen in the hospital corridor, his sprained wrist forgotten as he stared at the woman he hadn't seen in 2 years. Sarah Mitchell clutched 2 newborn babies against her chest, her face pale as she met his eyes through the glass doors of the maternity ward. "Marcus, I can explain everything, but not here. Not now." Sarah's voice shook as she tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go in the narrow hallway. "Not here, not now." Marcus pushed through the doors, ignoring the nurse who tried to stop him. "I'm looking at 2 babies who look exactly like me, and my ex-wife is holding them. When exactly would be a good time to explain that?" The babies stirred at the sound of his raised voice. One of them, a little girl with dark hair and olive skin that mirrored Marcus's own features, opened her eyes and looked directly at him. His breath caught in his throat. "Please, Marcus. They just fell asleep and I—" "How old are they?" Marcus stepped closer, his architect's eye for detail cataloguing every feature. The boy had his nose, the same cleft in his chin. The girl had Sarah's mouth but his eyes. "When were they born?" 3 days ago." Sarah's arms tightened protectively around the infants. 3 days ago. Marcus did the math quickly. "That means you were pregnant when we divorced. You told me you never wanted children." "You said—" "I know what I said." Tears started flowing down Sarah's cheeks. "But you don't understand what happened. You don't know—" "Then tell me," Marcus's voice echoed in the corridor. "Tell me why my ex-wife is standing here with babies that are obviously mine. Babies I knew nothing about, Doctor." Elena Vasquez appeared beside Sarah, her protective stance immediately clear. "Mr. Rivera, you need to lower your voice. This is a hospital." "Dr. Vasquez." Marcus recognized Sarah's colleague from their marriage. "You knew about this, didn't you? You knew she was pregnant." Elena glanced between Marcus and Sarah. "This isn't the place for this conversation. There won't be another place if she disappears again." Marcus ran his good hand through his hair, the same gesture he'd made countless times during their marriage when he was frustrated. "Sarah, just answer me. Are they mine?" Sarah looked down at the babies, then back up at Marcus. Her face was streaked with tears, exhaustion written in every line of her body. "Yes, they're yours. Isabella and Diego are your children." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had children, twins, and Sarah had hidden them from him completely. "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you didn't want kids?" "Because I thought you were dead," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "For 3 weeks I thought you were dead, and I—" She swayed suddenly, her knees buckling. Eleanor caught her arm, steadying her as the babies began to cry. "Sarah!" Marcus reached for her instinctively, but Elena blocked his path. "She needs to sit down. She just gave birth 3 days ago and she's exhausted." Elena's voice was sharp with authority. "Whatever this is about can wait." "No, it can't wait." Marcus's voice was desperate now. "I've already lost 2 years. I won't lose another day." As Elena helped Sarah to a nearby chair, she looked over her shoulder at Marcus. Her expression was filled with something he couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or regret. "Marcus," Elena said quietly, her words meant only for him. "She's been carrying this secret for months. Those babies, they're yours, but she's been raising them alone because she thought you were dead." The corridor seemed to spin around Marcus. "What are you talking about? I'm not dead. I'm standing right here." "The plane crash in Alaska 18 months ago. You were missing for 3 weeks. Sarah was told you were presumed dead." Elena's words came in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for too long. "She found out she was pregnant right after the crash. By the time you were found alive, she'd already—" "Dr. Vasquez, please." Sarah's voice was weak but urgent. "Don't." Marcus stared at Sarah holding his children, and felt his world tilt completely off its axis. The plane crash. He remembered the storm, the confusion, when he woke up in that Alaskan hospital with gaps in his memory. But he'd recovered. He'd come home. He'd tried to rebuild his life, and Sarah had left him. "You thought I was dead," he repeated slowly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. "And you were pregnant?" Another nod. "So, when I came back—" Marcus's voice trailed off as the pieces fell into place, the distance between them when he'd returned. Her insistence that they were too different, that she didn't want children. the quick divorce that had seemed to come from nowhere. When you came back, I was already 4 months pregnant, and I didn't know how to... Sarah's words tumbled over each other. Isabella chose that moment to let out a wail that pierced through the tension. Diego quickly joined her, their cries echoing off the hospital walls. "I have to feed them," Sarah said, struggling to stand with both babies in her arms. Marcus stepped forward automatically. "Let me help." "No." Sarah's refusal was immediate and sharp. "I can do it myself. I've been doing it myself." The words stung more than Marcus expected. He watched his ex-wife walk away with his children he'd never held, never seen until this moment, and felt something break inside his chest that he'd thought was already completely shattered. Elena touched his arm gently. "Give her time, Marcus. This is as hard for her as it is for you." "Is it?" Marcus watched Sarah disappear into a hospital room. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she made all the choices. She decided I was dead. She decided to have the babies alone. She decided to divorce me without telling me the truth. What choices did I get to make?" "The choice to be the man she needs you to be now," Elena said quietly. "If you still want to be." Through the window of the hospital room, Marcus could see Sarah settling into a chair with the babies. She looked up and caught his eye for just a moment before looking away. His children, his family, right there behind a pane of glass, and he had no idea how to reach them. Sarah's apartment felt smaller than Marcus remembered, though nothing had really changed except for the 2 cribs that now dominated the living room. She sat in the old rocking chair they'd bought together 3 years ago, the one she'd insisted they keep just in case. The irony wasn't lost on him now. Isabella slept peacefully in her arms while Diego fussed in his crib. Marcus had been calling for 3 days straight, leaving voicemails that went from angry demands to desperate pleas. She hadn't answered a single one. The knock on her door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Elena holding a bag of groceries and what looked like dinner from their favorite Thai place. "You look terrible," Elena said the moment Sarah opened the door. "Thanks. That's exactly what every new mother wants to hear." Sarah stepped aside to let her friend in, grateful for the company despite everything. Elena set the food on the kitchen counter and immediately went to Diego, picking him up with the practiced ease of a pediatrician. "Have you slept at all since you got home?" "Some." Sarah shifted Isabella to her other arm. "It's hard to sleep when your phone rings every 20 minutes. Marcus? Who else?" Sarah sank back into the rocking chair. "He wants to talk. He wants to see them. He wants explanations I don't know how to give." Elena sat on the couch with Diego, who had finally stopped crying. "Maybe you should start with the truth." "Which truth? That I've been lying to him for 2 years? That I watched him grieve our marriage while I was carrying his children? That every day I wanted to tell him but I was too much of a coward? How about the truth that you thought he was dead and you were trying to protect everyone involved?" Sarah's mind drifted back to 18 months ago, to the worst 3 weeks of her life. She'd been in Dr. Martinez's office, staring at the pregnancy test results she'd been hoping for throughout their entire marriage. "Congratulations, Sarah. The IVF worked. You're pregnant." She should have been ecstatic. For 2 years, she and Marcus had been trying to have a baby. The fertility treatments had been her secret shame, something she'd hidden from Marcus because she didn't want him to know how broken she felt, how inadequate. She'd planned to surprise him with the news when he returned from Alaska. Instead, she'd gotten the call that his plane was missing in a storm. "The search is ongoing, Mrs. Rivera." But after 72 hours in those conditions, 3 weeks, 3 weeks of hoping, praying, and slowly accepting that the man she loved was gone, 3 weeks of planning a future as a single mother, of grieving not just for Marcus, but for the family they would never be together. When they found him alive in that remote hospital, when she got the call that he was conscious and asking for her, she should have been relieved. Instead, she'd been terrified. "I was 6 months pregnant when he came back," Sarah said aloud, pulling herself from the memory. 6 months, and he looked at me like I was a stranger. He had a head injury, Sarah. The doctors said his memory was affected. But it came back, all of it, and by then... Sarah trailed off, remembering how distant Marcus had been when he returned to Chicago, how he'd thrown himself into work even more than before, staying late at the office, taking on bigger projects, how he'd seemed relieved when she said she wanted a divorce. "By then you'd convinced yourself that your marriage was over anyway," Elena finished. wasn't it? Even before the accident, we were growing apart. He was working constantly, and I was dealing with the fertility issues alone because I was too proud to tell him. When he came back, he seemed different, colder, like the accident had shown him something about our life together that he didn't like. Diego started fussing again, and Eleanor stood to pace with him. Did you ever think that maybe he was dealing with his own trauma? That maybe almost dying had changed his perspective on things? Of course it did. It made him realize he didn't want to be tied down to a wife who couldn't even get pregnant naturally. The bitterness in Sarah's voice surprised even her. That's not fair, and you know it. Sarah looked down at Isabella, who was stirring in her arms. You know what's not fair. Having to choose between telling the man you love that you're pregnant and risking that he'll stay out of obligation instead of love. Marcus never knew about the fertility treatments, Elena. He never knew how hard I was trying to give him the family he wanted. And when I finally got pregnant, he was gone. So you decided for both of you that it was better to end things. I decided that our children deserved better than parents who stayed together for the wrong reasons. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I'd rather raise them alone than watch Marcus resent us all for trapping him in a life he didn't want. Elena sat back down, adjusting Diego in her arms. And what if you were wrong? What if he did want that life? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen for the 15th time that day. Answer it, Elena said firmly. I can't. Sarah, he has a right to know his children. And they have a right to know their father. I know that. I need more time to figure out how to explain everything without making it worse. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. He's not going to give up, Elena pointed out. I know. Sarah closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. God, Elena, what have I done? How do I tell him that I've been planning to raise his children alone for months? How do I explain that I divorced him while I was pregnant with his babies because I was too scared to trust that he might actually want us? You start by admitting that you made mistakes. Both of you did. The phone rang again. This time Sarah looked at it for a long moment before declining the call. He left another voicemail, she said, checking her messages. There were 17 unheard voicemails from Marcus. What does he say? Sarah played the most recent one on speaker. Sarah, please. I know you're scared, and I know I don't deserve any explanations after the way our marriage ended. But these are my children too. I'm not asking you to let me back into your life. I'm asking you to let me into theirs. I've missed everything so far. Don't make me miss any more. His voice was raw with emotion, nothing like the cold, distant man she remembered from their divorce proceedings. He sounds different, Elena observed. People say things they don't mean when they're emotional, and sometimes they say things they've never been brave enough to say before. Elena shifted Diego to her shoulder. Sarah, I was there during those 3 weeks when he was missing. I saw what it did to you, but I also saw Marcus when he came back and found out you wanted a divorce. He was devastated. He seemed relieved. He seemed broken. There's a difference. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. I love you both already, and I don't even know them yet. Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. I don't know how to do this, Elena. I don't know how to tell him the truth without admitting that I've been lying to him for 2 years. I don't know how to trust that he won't leave again when things get hard. You don't have to figure it all out at once, but you do have to start somewhere. Isabella began to cry, and Sarah automatically began rocking her. The motion was soothing for both of them. What if I tell him everything, and he hates me? What if you don't tell him, and you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been Eleanor's? Question hung in the air as both babies finally settled into sleep. Outside, Sarah could hear the familiar sounds of evening in Chicago, the city that held all their memories, good and bad. I'll think about it, Sarah said finally. Don't think too long. That man is going to wear a hole in the sidewalk outside this building if you don't talk to him soon. After Elena left, Sarah stood at her living room window with Isabella in her arms. Sure enough, Marcus's car was parked across the street, and she could see his silhouette in the driver's seat. He was waiting, just like he'd said he would. The coffee shop on Oak Street had been their place once. Sarah chose it deliberately, hoping the familiar setting might make the conversation easier. It didn't. Marcus sat across from her in the same booth where they'd had their first date 4 years ago. But everything else had changed. His face was thinner, more angular, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and stress. Sarah wondered if she looked as different to him as he did to her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Marcus said, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he hadn't touched. "Dr. Vasquez is watching the twins." Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. "I can't stay long." "Isabella and Diego." Marcus tested their names, as if trying to make them real. "You named them. Someone had to." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, and Marcus flinched. "Sarah, I need you to help me understand what happened from the beginning." She took a breath, trying to organize 2 years of secrets into something that made sense. "I was pregnant when your plane went down. I'd just found out that morning." Pregnant how? We'd been trying for 2 years with no luck. This was the part she'd been dreading. IVF. I'd been doing fertility treatments for 6 months. Marcus stared at her. 6 months? Why didn't you tell me? Because I felt broken. The admission came out in a rush. Because every month that we didn't get pregnant, I felt like more of a failure as a wife. Because I didn't want you to know that something was wrong with me. Something was wrong with you? Sarah, fertility issues affect couples, not just... Don't. Sarah held up her hand. Don't try to make me feel better about it now. For 2 years I watched you want children that I couldn't give you naturally. Do you know what that does to a person? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Is that why you were so distant those last months before the accident? Why you kept pulling away from me? I was dealing with hormone treatments and doctor appointments and the constant stress of hoping this would be the month, and you were working 16-hour days on the Morrison project. I was working those hours to build something for our future, for the family we wanted. But we never talked about it. We never talked about anything real anymore. Sarah's voice cracked. And then you left for Alaska, and I was going to surprise you with the pregnancy news when you got back. Instead, I got a call saying your plane was missing. Marcus closed his eyes. 3 weeks. 21 days of thinking you were dead. 21 days of planning to raise your baby alone. 21 days of grieving not just for you, but for the family we'd never get to be together. But I came back. You came back different. Sarah met his eyes directly. You came back distant and cold, throwing yourself into work even more than before. You barely looked at me, Marcus. When I mentioned the future, you changed the subject. When I tried to talk about us, you found excuses to leave the room. I had a head injury. I was confused about a lot of things. But your memory came back, all of it. And you still seemed like you couldn't wait to get away from me. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar it made Sarah's chest ache. I thought you didn't want me anymore. You were so distant when I got back. You barely touched me. You said you'd realized some things while I was gone. I had realized things. I realized how much I loved you. I also realized how broken our marriage was, and I was 6 months pregnant by then, Marcus. 6 months. How was I supposed to tell you that? By telling me the truth. The truth. The truth was that I was terrified you'd stay because of the baby, instead of because you wanted to be with me. The truth was that I'd rather raise your child alone than watch you resent us both for trapping you in a marriage you clearly wanted out of. Marcus stared at her. I never wanted out of our marriage. You seemed relieved when I said I wanted a divorce. I was devastated. I thought I was giving you what you wanted because you seemed so unhappy with me. They sat in silence, the weight of their mutual misunderstanding heavy between them. Sarah watched Marcus process everything she'd told him, saw the moment when the full impact hit him. You were pregnant during our entire divorce, he said slowly. Yes. You sat in that lawyer's office signing papers to end our marriage while you were carrying my children. Yes. And you let me believe you didn't want kids. I thought it was better than admitting I was already having them. Marcus's phone rang, cutting through the tension. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed completely. I have to take this, he answered quickly. Yes? Now? Are you sure? Sarah watched his face transform as he listened. When he hung up, he looked like he'd been struck by lightning. What is it? She asked. That was my business partner. The Dubai project. The one we've been working toward for 3 years. They just awarded it to our firm. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Dubai? It's everything we've worked for. The biggest international contract we've ever landed. Marcus was talking fast, his excitement evident despite everything else. 3 years in Dubai designing the new financial district. It would establish us as a global firm. Congratulations. The word tasted like ash in Sarah's mouth. Sarah, this changes everything. This is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. I'm sure it is. She started to stand. I should go. The twins. Wait. Marcus grabbed her hand. I didn't mean it like that. Didn't you? Sarah looked down at his hand on hers. You just found out you have children, and 5 minutes later you're talking about moving to Dubai for 3 years. Some things never change. That's not fair, isn't it? This is exactly what happened before, Marcus. Work always comes first. It came first when I was struggling with fertility treatments. It came first when you came back from Alaska, and now it's coming first again. I haven't even said I'm taking the job. But you want to. I can see it in your eyes. This is your dream project, and I'm not going to be the reason you don't take it. Sarah pulled her hand free and stood up. This is why I didn't tell you about the twins. This is exactly why. Sarah, please sit down. We need to talk about this. No, we don't. You need to make your choice, and I need to get back to my children. Our children. The correction stopped her cold. Are they? Because it sounds like you're already planning to leave them behind for 3 years. I just found out about them an hour ago. I haven't had time to process any of this. Well, when you do process it, let me know what you decide. But don't expect me to put my life on hold while you figure out whether being a father fits into your career plans. Sarah was halfway to the door when Marcus called after her. I love you. She stopped, her hand on the door handle, but didn't turn around. I never stopped loving you, Sarah. Not during the divorce, not in the 2 years since. And I love them too, even though I don't know them yet. Sarah's shoulders shook, but she didn't turn around. Love isn't enough, Marcus. It never was. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Marcus alone with his untouched coffee and the sound of his phone ringing again. This time it was the Dubai project manager calling to discuss logistics. Marcus stared at the phone for a long moment, then declined the call. Outside, Sarah sat in her car for 10 minutes before she could stop crying enough to drive home. Through the coffee shop window, she could see Marcus still sitting in their booth, his head in his hands. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. How did it go? Sarah typed back, He's moving to Dubai for 3 years. Did he say that? He didn't have to. She drove home to her apartment, to Isabella and Diego, to the life she'd built without Marcus. But for the first time since the twins were born, that life felt incomplete in a way that had nothing to do with missing sleep or the challenges of single motherhood. It felt incomplete because she'd finally told Marcus the truth, and deep down, she'd been hoping he would choose differently this time. Instead, he was choosing exactly what she'd always known he would choose. His career, his dreams, his life without them. Marcus stared at the Dubai contract spread across his desk, the signatures pages still blank after 3 days. His business partner Jake had called 6 times since the coffee shop meeting, each conversation more frustrated than the last. This is insane, Marcus. You're throwing away the biggest opportunity of our careers. I'm not throwing anything away, I'm thinking. About what? A woman who divorced you and hid your kids from you for 2 years. Marcus had hung up on him after that. Now he sat in his downtown office at 6 p.m., watching the sun set over Chicago, thinking about 2 babies he'd never held. His phone had been silent all day. Sarah wasn't answering his calls again. The knock on his office door interrupted his brooding. His assistant had left hours ago, so he was surprised to see Dr. Elena Vasquez standing in his doorway. We need to talk, she said without preamble. If Sarah sent you... Sarah doesn't know I'm here. She'd probably kill me if she did. Elena closed the door behind her and sat down across from his desk. But someone needs to tell you what really happened while you were gone. Marcus leaned back in his chair. She told me. The fertility treatments, the pregnancy, thinking I was dead. She told you the facts. She didn't tell you what it cost her. Elena's voice was sharp with protective anger. Do you have any idea what those 21 days were like for her? I can imagine... No, you can't, because you weren't there. Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled through something. She called me every day, sometimes multiple times. Do you want to know what she said? Marcus didn't answer, but Elena continued anyway. Day 3. Elena, what if he's hurt somewhere and they just haven't found him yet? Day 7. I keep thinking I hear his key in the door. Day 12. I don't know how to plan a funeral when there's no body. Day 18. I have to tell his parents their son is dead and that I'm pregnant with their grandchild they'll never meet. Each quote hit Marcus like a physical blow. She planned your memorial service, Marcus. She wrote your eulogy. She sat in that church with your parents and friends and spoke about the man she loved and the father you'd never get to be. And she was 4 months pregnant while she did it. Marcus's throat felt tight. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Because when you came back you were so wrapped up in your own trauma that you couldn't see hers. Elena's voice softened slightly. I'm not saying that was wrong. You went through something terrible too, but you have to understand what she sacrificed. She said I seemed different when I came back. You were different. You came back focused on work, on rebuilding, on moving forward. You never talked about the accident or what it felt like to almost die. You never asked her what those weeks were like for her. Marcus thought back to those first months after his return. The gaps in his memory had been terrifying, and work had been the one thing that made sense. Building, creating, designing, those were concrete things he could control when everything else felt uncertain. I thought she was pulling away from me because she'd realized she didn't want me anymore. She was pulling away because she was 7 months pregnant and terrified to tell you. Elena stood up. Marcus, I watched her struggle with that decision every single day. She wanted to tell you so badly it was killing her, but she was convinced you'd stay out of obligation. That's ridiculous. Is it? You worked 70-hour weeks before the accident. You came back and worked even more. When was the last time before that crash that you and Sarah had a real conversation about your future together? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He couldn't remember. She needed you to fight for your marriage, and instead you threw yourself into the Morrison project. She needed you to show her that she was more important than work, and instead you stayed late at the office every night. I was trying to build something for us. But you never told her that. You never told her anything. Eleanor moved toward the door. Look, I'm not here to relitigate your marriage. I'm here because those babies deserve to know their father, and Sarah deserves better than the choice she thinks she has to make. What choice? Between being a single mother or watching you choose work over family again. Eleanor paused with her hand on the door handle. She thinks you're taking the Dubai job. I haven't decided. Haven't you? Elena's look was pointed. It's been 3 days, Marcus. 3 days since you found out you're a father, and you still haven't been to see your children. What does that tell her? After Elena left, Marcus sat alone in his office for another hour. Finally, he picked up his phone and called Jake. Finally. Please tell me you're calling to say you've come to your senses. I'm calling to say I'm not taking Dubai. The silence on the other end was deafening. Marcus, think about what you're saying. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. I know, but I have children now, Jake, twins, and I've already missed the first 4 days of their lives. I won't miss any more. He hung up before Jake could respond and grabbed his keys. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood outside Sarah's apartment building, holding a bag from the baby store and wondering if he'd lost his mind. He'd spent $200 on things he wasn't even sure newborns needed, but the salesperson had assured him that new fathers always felt better when they brought gifts. He felt ridiculous. Sarah answered the door looking exhausted, wearing an old t-shirt and pajama pants. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Marcus, what are you doing here? I brought some things for the babies. He held up the bag awkwardly, and I was hoping I could see them. Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. They're sleeping right now. I can wait. The apartment was quiet except for the soft sounds of infant breathing coming from the living room. Marcus followed Sarah to the doorway and saw them for the second time, Isabella in a pink sleeper, Diego in blue, both of them perfect and tiny, and his. They're beautiful, he whispered. They look like you. They have your mouth, your chin. Marcus couldn't take his eyes off them. Would it be okay if I held one of them? Sarah looked surprised. You want to hold them? I want to hold my children, yes. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded toward Isabella. She's usually calmer. Just support her head. Marcus's hands were shaking as Sarah lifted Isabella from her crib and placed her in his arms. The baby stirred slightly but didn't wake. She was so light, so fragile. Marcus had designed buildings that would stand for decades, but he'd never held anything as precious as this tiny person. Hi, Isabella, he whispered. I'm your dad. The words felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Isabella made a small sound and turned her face toward his chest, and Marcus felt something shift fundamentally in his understanding of himself. "I turned down Dubai," he said without looking up from his daughter. Sarah went very still. "What?" "I called them an hour ago." "I'm not taking the job." "Marcus, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He finally looked at her. "Eleanor came to see me today. She told me some things I needed to hear about what happened while I was missing, about what you went through. Elena had no right. She had every right. Someone needed to tell me the truth since we're both apparently terrible at it." Marcus shifted Isabella slightly, marveling at how naturally she fit in his arms. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most. I'm sorry I was so focused on rebuilding after the accident that I couldn't see you were falling apart. And I'm sorry it took finding out about Isabella and Diego for me to realize what really matters." Tears were sliding down Sarah's cheeks. "You can't give up your dream job for us. I won't let you do that. It's not your choice to make." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm their father. This is where I belong." Diego began to fuss in his crib, and Sarah moved to pick him up. As she settled into the rocking chair with him, Marcus sat on the couch with Isabella, and for the first time in years, something felt right in his world. "I don't know how to do this," Sarah said quietly. "Neither do I, but I want to learn. Marcus looked at Isabella's perfect tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. "I want to learn everything. How to change diapers and give bottles and tell when they're hungry versus tired versus just cranky. It's not easy. I didn't expect it to be." He met her eyes. "But I'm not going anywhere, Sarah, not for Dubai, not for any job. These are my children, and I'm going to be their father. Whether you want me back in your life or not, I'm going to be in theirs." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each holding a baby, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Diego fell back asleep, and Sarah put him in his crib. "I should go," Marcus said, though he made no move to put Isabella down. "You could stay for dinner if you want. It's just leftover pasta, but—" Sarah trailed off, looking uncertain. "I'd like that." As Sarah heated up dinner, Marcus continued to hold Isabella, talking to her in soft whispers about everything and nothing. He told her about the buildings he'd designed, about the city outside her windows, about how sorry he was that he'd missed her birth. "You're a natural," Sarah said from the kitchen. "I don't feel like one. None of us do at first, but you'll learn." She paused in stirring the pasta. "Marcus, what happens now? Between us, I mean." It was the question he'd been dreading and hoping for all at once. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know I want to find out, if you'll let me." Sarah didn't answer immediately, but she didn't say no either. For now, that felt like enough. 6 months had changed everything and nothing at all. Marcus had become a fixture in Sarah's daily routine, arriving every morning at 7 with coffee and staying until the twins' evening feeding. He'd learned to change diapers without gagging, could identify the difference between Isabella's hungry cry and her sleepy one, and had mastered the art of bouncing Diego just the right way to stop his fussing. But he still went home to his empty penthouse every night, and Sarah still slept alone in her small bedroom. They were co-parenting successfully, even beautifully, but they were dancing around the elephant in the room, the undeniable fact that they were falling in love with each other all over again. "You're staring," Sarah said, not looking up from where she was feeding Isabella on the couch. Marcus, who had been watching her from the kitchen where he was preparing Diego's bottle, didn't deny it. "You're beautiful when you do that." "I'm covered in spit-up and haven't washed my hair in 2 days. Still beautiful." The comment hung in the air between them, charged with the tension that had been building for weeks. They'd been careful not to cross any lines, maintaining the careful boundaries of friendship and shared parenting. But moments like this made it increasingly difficult. Diego, as if sensing the mood, began crying from his bouncy seat. Marcus moved to pick him up, and their hands brushed as Sarah handed him the burp cloth. The contact was brief but electric. "Marcus," Sarah started, but was interrupted by a knock at the door. "Expecting someone?" Marcus asked, settling Diego against his shoulder. "No." Sarah frowned, handing Isabella to Marcus so she could answer the door. Both babies fit naturally in his arms now, one on each side, and the sight made her heart skip in a way she tried to ignore. The woman at the door was professionally dressed with a warm smile and a clipboard. Sarah Mitchell. I'm Jennifer Walsh from Seattle Children's Hospital. Sarah's face went pale. Oh, I wasn't expecting you to come in person. May I come in? I was in town for a conference and thought I'd stop by to discuss the position we offered you. Marcus looked between them, confusion clear on his face. Position? Sarah reluctantly let Jennifer in, avoiding Marcus's eyes. This is Marcus Rivera, the twins' father. Marcus, this is Jennifer Walsh. She's the nursing director at Seattle Children's Hospital. Ah, the father. Jennifer's smile widened. Congratulations on the twins. They're beautiful. And don't worry, Seattle is a wonderful place to raise children. The position we're offering Sarah is head of pediatric nursing, which would be perfect for someone with her experience and skills. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at Sarah, the babies forgotten in his arms. Seattle, he said quietly. I applied months ago, Sarah said quickly. Before everything. I'd forgotten they were even considering me. It's quite an honor, Jennifer continued, oblivious to the tension. We don't often find candidates with Sarah's qualifications who are willing to relocate. The salary is excellent, and we provide relocation assistance. When can you start? I haven't actually accepted yet. Jennifer looked surprised. Oh, I apologize. I assumed from your initial enthusiasm that this was just a formality. Is there something holding you back? Sarah glanced at Marcus, who was looking at her like she'd slapped him. Could you give us a moment? Marcus asked Jennifer, his voice carefully controlled. Of course, I'll wait in the hallway. The moment the door closed, Marcus turned to Sarah. Seattle. Marcus, let me explain. How long have you known? They called last week with the official offer. Last week. Marcus was speaking in that quiet, dangerous tone she remembered from their worst fights during their marriage. Last week, while I was here every day, falling in love with my children, falling in love with you again, you've been planning to move across the country. I haven't been planning anything. I needed to consider all my options. Your options. Marcus looked down at Isabella and Diego, who were both sleeping peacefully in his arms. Are we just an option to you, Sarah? Is this whole thing just something you're trying out until something better comes along? That's not fair, isn't it? 6 months ago, you were planning to raise them alone. Now you're planning to move them 2,000 miles away. When exactly were you going to tell me about this? Sarah sank onto the couch. I don't know. I was hoping the decision would be easier by now. What decision? Whether or not to take my children away from me. They're my children too. Yes, they are. And you've made every major decision about their lives without consulting me. Their birth, their names, where they live, and now apparently what state they grow up in. Marcus was right, and Sarah knew it, but the offer from Seattle represented everything she'd worked toward in her career. Head of pediatric nursing at one of the country's best children's hospitals, the kind of position she'd dreamed about since nursing school. This is my career, Marcus. This is what I've worked for my entire life. And what about what I've worked for? 6 months of learning to be a father. 6 months of falling asleep thinking about Isabella's first word and Diego's first steps. 6 months of believing we might actually figure this out together. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah felt her resolve wavering. You could come with us. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Come with you to do what? Start over completely in a city where I don't know anyone, don't have any clients, don't have a business. People move for their families all the time. Do they? Because 6 months ago you told me I always chose work over family. Now you're asking me to give up everything I've built here to follow you to Seattle for your dream job. How is that any different? Sarah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right again. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Marcus looked at the babies in his arms, then back at her. Do you love me, Sarah? The question caught her off guard. What? It's a simple question. Do you love me? Marcus, that's not... Because I love you. I love you more than I did when we were married, more than I thought possible. I love the mother you've become, the woman you are now. I love watching you with our children. I love the life we've been building together, even if it's complicated and unconventional. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. I love you too. Then why are you running away again? I'm not running away. I'm trying to build a career, a future for myself and the twins. A future that doesn't include me. Before Sarah could respond, Jennifer knocked on the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do have a flight to catch. Marcus handed the babies to Sarah and opened the door. She needs more time to think about it. Of course. Sarah, the offer stands for 2 weeks. After that, we'll need to move forward with other candidates. Jennifer paused. For what it's worth, it's clear you have a beautiful family here. Whatever you decide, I'm sure it will be the right choice. After Jennifer left, Marcus gathered his things without speaking. Where are you going? Sarah asked. Home. You have a decision to make, and I can't be here while you make it. Marcus, please, can't we talk about this? He stopped at the door. What's there to talk about? You've already decided that your career is more important than our family, just like I used to do with my work. I guess we really are perfect for each other. That's not what this is, isn't it? Marcus's hand was on the doorknob. You know what the hardest part is? For 6 months I've been proving to you that I've changed, that I can put family first, that I can be the man and father you need me to be. But you haven't changed at all, Sarah. You're still making unilateral decisions about our lives. You're still so afraid of being vulnerable that you'd rather run away than trust that we might actually work this time. He left without another word, and Sarah sat alone with the twins, staring at the Seattle hospital brochure Jennifer had left behind. Outside, Marcus sat in his car for 20 minutes before he could trust himself to drive. His phone rang, Jake calling about a new project, but he ignored it. Instead, he called his assistant and asked her to clear his schedule for the rest of the week. He had some thinking to do, and for the first time in his adult life, work was going to have to wait. 2 days later, Sarah still hadn't heard from Marcus. She'd called 6 times, but he wasn't answering. Eleanor had stopped by twice, but Sarah hadn't told her about Seattle yet. The brochure sat on her kitchen counter, a glossy reminder of the choice she had to make. Seattle Children's Hospital, head of pediatric nursing, everything she'd worked for. But every time she looked at it, all she could think about was the hurt in Marcus's eyes when he'd left. Isabella chose that moment to start crying, followed immediately by Diego. As Sarah juggled both babies, trying to calm them down, she realized something that made her stop in her tracks. For 6 months, Marcus had been here for moments like this. 6 months of shared feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. 6 months of him proving, over and over again, that he was committed to being their father. And she was about to take that away from him. The thought made her physically sick. She was still holding both crying babies when her phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and she answered immediately. Sarah, I need you to meet me somewhere. Marcus, I'm so glad you called. I need to tell you. Meet me at the hospital, the maternity ward where we first saw each other with the twins. There's something I need to show you. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in confusion. An hour later, after calling Elena to babysit, Sarah stood in the same hospital corridor where Marcus had first seen her with Isabella and Diego. He was waiting for her, but he wasn't alone. A woman in a business suit stood beside him, along with what looked like an architect and a hospital administrator. Sarah, Marcus said as she approached, I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Chen, the Chief of Staff at Seattle Children's Hospital. Sarah's confusion deepened. I don't understand. Dr. Chen stepped forward with a warm smile. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Rivera contacted our hospital yesterday with a very interesting proposal. He's offered to design a new pediatric wing for our facility, pro bono. It would be a state-of-the-art facility, specifically designed for children and families. Sarah stared at Marcus. You called Seattle. I called them yesterday morning. Told them I was your husband and the father of your children, and that if they wanted the best pediatric nurse in the country, they were getting a package deal. Marcus's expression was serious but hopeful. I can work from anywhere, Sarah. What I can't do is live without you and our children. Marcus, you can't just give up your entire business. I'm not giving it up, I'm expanding it. Seattle has been looking for a firm to handle several major municipal projects. It would actually be good for business. Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. The pediatric wing he's proposed would make us one of the premier children's hospitals on the West Coast. And frankly, having both of you would be invaluable to our staff. Sarah felt overwhelmed. I can't ask you to do this. You're not asking. I'm offering. Marcus stepped closer. Sarah, 6 months ago I chose work over us. I won't make that mistake again. If you want Seattle, then we go to Seattle together. But your life is here. Your friends, your business. Everything you've built, everything I've built, doesn't mean anything without you and Isabella and Diego. Marcus reached for her hands. I love you, Sarah. I love our family. And I'll follow you anywhere if it means we get to be together. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face. What if it doesn't work? What if we fail again? Then we fail together. But Sarah, I don't think we're going to fail. I think we're going to be amazing. Dr. Chen cleared her throat politely. I don't mean to interrupt, but we would need an answer fairly soon if you're both interested in relocating. Sarah looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw everything she'd fallen in love with years ago, plus everything he'd become in the past 6 months. The man who learned to change diapers without complaining. The man who sang lullabies to colicky babies at 2 in the morning. The man who had just offered to uproot his entire life because he loved her. Yes, she said, her voice strong and clear. Yes, we're interested. Marcus's smile could have powered the entire hospital. He pulled her into his arms, spinning her around in the same corridor where their story had begun again 6 months ago. Are you sure? He whispered against her ear. I'm sure. I love you, Marcus Rivera, and I want to build our life together. All of it. The good parts and the hard parts and everything in between. When he kissed her, Sarah felt like she was coming home for the first time in years. There's just one more thing, Marcus said when they broke apart. What? He dropped to one knee right there in the hospital corridor, pulling a ring box from his pocket. Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me? Again? For real this time, with no secrets and no running away? Sarah laughed through her tears. Yes. Yes. Of course, yes. As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, Sarah realized that sometimes the best things in life were worth waiting for, even if you had to lose them first to understand how precious they really were. 1 year later, Sarah stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bridal suite at the Seattle Botanical Garden, adjusting the simple white dress she'd chosen for their second wedding. This time there would be no elaborate ceremony, no hundreds of guests, just the people who mattered most. You look beautiful, Elena said, fastening the pearl necklace that had been Sarah's grandmother's. More beautiful than at your first wedding, actually. I feel different this time. Sarah touched the necklace gently, more sure, more myself. Through the window, she could see Marcus in the garden with Isabella and Diego, now walking toddlers who had their father wrapped around their tiny fingers. He was kneeling between them, probably explaining something about the flowers in that patient way he'd developed since becoming a father. Are you nervous? Elena asked, smoothing Sarah's hair. No. Sarah was surprised to realize it was true. I should be, shouldn't I? Second weddings are supposed to be scary. Not when they're with the right person at the right time. A soft knock interrupted them. Sarah? It's Marcus. Can I come in for a minute? It's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, Elena called through the door. We make our own luck, Sarah said, opening the door herself. Marcus stood in the hallway wearing a simple black suit, holding Isabella on one hip while Diego clung to his leg. Both children were dressed in matching outfits, Isabella in a cream-colored dress with tiny flowers, Diego in a miniature suit that made him look impossibly grown up. Wow, Marcus breathed, looking at Sarah. You're stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself. Sarah reached out to straighten his tie, a gesture so familiar and domestic it made her heart flutter. Dada up, Diego demanded, reaching for Sarah even though she was wearing white. Careful, buddy. Mama's wearing a special dress today. But Marcus lifted Diego anyway, and Sarah took him without hesitation, white dress be damned. I wanted to give you something before the ceremony, Marcus said, shifting Isabella to his other arm. A wedding gift. Marcus, you didn't need to. It's not that kind of gift. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It's our new house. Sarah stared at the screen. The house was beautiful. A craftsman-style home with a wide front porch, large windows, and what looked like a massive backyard. Marcus, it's gorgeous, but we can't afford... We can. The Seattle contracts have been even better than I hoped, and your salary increase kicked in last month. Marcus swiped to the next photo, showing the interior. 3 bedrooms upstairs plus a master suite. Office space for both of us, and look at this. The final photo showed an enormous kitchen with an island big enough for 4 people and a breakfast nook that overlooked the backyard. There's room for family dinners, Marcus said quietly. Room for the kids to do homework while we cook. Room for birthday parties and holidays and all the ordinary moments I want to build with you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. When did you have time to find this? I've been looking for 3 months. I wanted it to be perfect. Marcus touched her face gently. I wanted to give you a home that feels like forever. It's beautiful. But Marcus, you are my forever. These two are my forever. She gestured to Isabella and Diego, who were now more interested in pulling at her dress than listening to their parents. The house is just where we keep it. Kiss, Isabella announced loudly, clapping her hands. The princess has spoken, Eleanor laughed from behind them. Marcus leaned over the children and kissed Sarah softly. I love you, Mrs. Rivera-to-be. I love you too. Mama, Dada! Diego pointed toward the garden where guests were beginning to gather. I think that's our cue, Marcus said. You ready to do this? I've been ready for a year. The ceremony itself was perfect in its simplicity. 30 guests sat in white chairs, arranged in a semicircle around a rose-covered archway. Marcus's parents had flown in from Arizona, beaming as they watched their son marry the woman they'd always considered a daughter. Sarah's sister held Isabella and Diego during the vows, both children surprisingly well behaved, for the 5 minutes the ceremony lasted. But it was the vows themselves that made everyone cry. Sarah, Marcus began, his voice steady but emotional. The first time we got married, I promised to love you forever. I thought I knew what that meant. I thought forever was just a really long time. But I learned that forever isn't about time. It's about choice. It's choosing to love you when you're exhausted from night feedings. It's choosing to trust you when we disagree about how to discipline the twins. It's choosing to build a life with you, even when it means starting over in a new city. He paused, looking at Isabella and Diego. You gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. You made me a father. And you did it twice. Once when you carried our children, and again when you let me into their lives. I promise to choose you and them every day for the rest of my life. Sarah wiped her eyes, grateful for waterproof mascara. Marcus, when we divorced, I thought our story was over. I thought I'd ruined the best thing in my life by being too afraid to trust it. But you taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about admitting when you're scared and asking for help when you need it. She looked at their children. Isabella and Diego made us a family, but you made us whole. You chose us over your career, over your comfort zone, over everything you thought you wanted. You showed me what it looks like when someone puts family first, and you made me brave enough to do the same. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Sarah like they had all the time in the world. Isabella clapped enthusiastically while Diego tried to climb down from Sarah's sister's lap to join them. The reception was held in the garden's pavilion, decorated with simple white flowers and string lights. Marcus had hired a photographer, but the best moments were captured on phones. Isabella taking her first solo steps toward her grandparents, Diego stealing frosting from the wedding cake, Sarah and Marcus dancing to the same song they'd chosen for their first wedding. Any regrets? Elena asked Sarah during a quiet moment as they watched Marcus teach Isabella how to pick flowers. About what? The first marriage, the divorce, all the time you lost. Sarah considered the question. I used to think I'd ruined everything by being too scared to tell Marcus the truth, but if I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't have learned how to fix them. We wouldn't be who we are now. So no regrets? None. Sarah smiled as Diego toddled over and demanded to be picked up. Besides, look what came out of it. As the evening wound down, Marcus found Sarah sitting in a quiet corner of the garden, nursing Diego while Isabella slept in her stroller. Tired? He asked, settling beside her. Happy tired, the best kind. Marcus reached over and brushed a curl away from Isabella's face. Dr. Chen stopped by earlier. She said the pediatric wing groundbreaking is scheduled for next month. I can't believe it's really happening. Believe it, your wing is going to help thousands of children. Our wing, Sarah corrected. You designed it. I designed it for you. For the nurse who stays late with scared parents, who remembers every patient's name, who makes children feel safe when they're at their most vulnerable. Sarah leaned against his shoulder. I have something to tell you. Should I be worried? I don't think so. Sarah smiled mysteriously. Dr. Chen offered me another promotion today. Director of all pediatric nursing services for the hospital system. Marcus sat up straighter. Sarah, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me during the ceremony? Because I wanted to talk to you about it first this time, before I gave her an answer. What does it involve? More responsibility, more travel between facilities, definitely more hours. Sarah looked at him carefully. It would mean less time at home with the twins, at least initially. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I want the job. It's everything I've worked for professionally. But I also want us to make the decision together. Then we say yes. Just like that. Just like that. Marcus kissed the top of her head. You supported my career for years, even when it meant I worked too much. Now it's my turn to support yours. Besides, Isabella and Diego need to see their mother being amazing at what she does. Sarah's eyes filled with tears for the second time that day. I love you so much it sometimes scares me. Good, that means it's real. As they sat together in the garden, their children sleeping peacefully between them, Sarah thought about the photo Marcus had shown her earlier, their new house with room for all the moments they'd build together. But she realized that home wasn't really about the house, or even the city they lived in. Home was this. Marcus humming softly to keep Diego calm while he nursed. Isabella's tiny hand curled around Sarah's finger, even in sleep. The quiet certainty that whatever challenges came next, they'd face them together. Ready to go home? Marcus asked as the last guests began to leave. Sarah looked around the garden where they'd just promised to love each other forever, for the second time. But somehow it felt like the first time that counted. I am home, she said simply. Marcus smiled and helped her to her feet, careful not to wake the children. Then let's go live there. As they walked toward their car, Diego in Marcus's arms and Isabella in her stroller, Sarah realized that sometimes the most beautiful endings were really just beginnings in disguise. They'd lost each other once through fear and miscommunication and bad timing, but they'd found each other again through honesty and sacrifice, and the kind of love that was strong enough to survive its own mistakes. And this time, they were going to keep each other. This time, forever really meant forever. The sound of laughter echoed through the backyard of the Craftsman house as 10-year-old Isabella chased her younger brother Oliver around the swing set, while 8-year-old Diego attempted to referee from his perch in the treehouse Marcus had built the previous summer. "Mom, Isabella's cheating!" Oliver called out, his dark hair, so much like Marcus's, falling into his eyes as he ran. "I am not," Isabella protested, her pigtails flying. "You're just slow." Sarah looked up from where she was setting the table on the back porch, watching her children with the same sense of wonder she'd felt every day for the past decade. Oliver had been a surprise, a beautiful, joyful surprise that had arrived 2 years after the wedding, completing their family in a way they hadn't even known they needed. "Dinner in 5 minutes," she called out. "Go wash your hands." "Can we eat in the treehouse?" Diego asked, always the negotiator. "Not tonight. Grandma and Grandpa are here." Through the kitchen window, Sarah could see Marcus's parents helping him carry dishes outside, while her own parents entertained Oliver with magic tricks. These Sunday family dinners had become sacred tradition, the room for family gatherings Marcus had dreamed of, filled with exactly the kind of chaos and love he'd envisioned. "Need help?" Marcus appeared beside her, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. "I've got it." Sarah leaned back against him, still marveling after all these years at how perfectly she fit against him. "How did the site visit go yesterday?" "Better than expected. The Children's Hospital in Portland wants us to design their new NICU. Apparently, word is spreading about the Seattle project." Sarah smiled. The pediatric wing they'd built together had won several architectural awards and had become a model for hospitals nationwide. Marcus's practice had grown beyond anything he'd imagined, specializing now in healthcare facilities designed specifically for children and families. "That's wonderful. When would you need to start?" "Not for 6 months, and it would only require travel twice a month." Marcus kissed her temple. "I already told them my family comes first. If they can't work with that schedule, they can find another architect. Look at you setting boundaries with clients." "I learned from the best." Marcus turned her in his arms. "Speaking of which, how was your board meeting this week?" Sarah's promotion 10 years ago had led to another and another, until she now sat on the board of directors for Seattle Children's Hospital, the first nurse ever to hold such a position. She was also finishing her doctorate in pediatric nursing, though she'd learned to balance her ambitions with her family life. They approved the new family support center, full funding. The one with the overnight rooms for parents, and the kitchen facilities and the play areas for siblings. Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement. It's going to change everything for families with long-term patience. I'm proud of you, Marcus said softly. Every day, I'm proud of you. Before Sarah could respond, Oliver came bounding up the porch steps, his hands still dripping from the outdoor faucet. Dad, will you tell Isabella that soccer isn't just for boys? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Did someone tell you soccer was just for boys? Tommy Martinez at school said girls can't play real soccer. Tommy Martinez has never met your sister, Marcus said seriously. Isabella scored 3 goals in her last game. I'd say that's pretty real. Isabella appeared at the top of the steps, having clearly heard the entire conversation. I can beat Tommy Martinez any day. That's my girl, Sarah laughed. But maybe we start with just playing well, not beating people up. I wouldn't beat him up, Isabella said with the logic of a 10-year-old. I'd just score more goals than him. Diego climbed down from the treehouse, always the peacemaker. We could start a family team. Mom and Dad could coach. I like that idea, Marcus said. Team Rivera. What do you think, Mom? Sarah looked around at her family. Marcus still handsome and now distinguished with threads of silver in his hair. Isabella fierce and determined. Diego thoughtful and kind. Oliver energetic and funny, and felt the same overwhelming gratitude she'd experienced every day since their second wedding. I think Team Rivera sounds perfect. Dinner was the usual beautiful chaos. 3 generations crowded around the long table Marcus had custom-built for their dining room, conversations overlapping as they shared stories about work and school and weekend plans. Marcus's father told elaborate stories about his latest fishing trip, while Sarah's mother interrogated the children about their grades. Isabella dominated the conversation with detailed analysis of her soccer team's championship chances, while Oliver provided running commentary on everything from the weather to the relative merits of different types of pasta. Remember when dinners were quiet? Marcus whispered to Sarah, as Oliver demonstrated his new magic trick for the 3rd time. No, Sarah whispered back. I really don't. It was true. The early years of their remarriage felt like a different lifetime, when the twins were toddlers and every meal was a negotiation, when they were still learning how to be married to each other again, when they were building their new life one careful day at a time. Now, 10 years later, the careful had become confident. They'd weathered sleepless nights with a colicky Oliver, Isabella's broken arm from her first attempt at skateboarding, Diego's anxiety about starting middle school, Marcus's father's heart surgery 2 years ago, and Sarah's own health scare that had turned out to be nothing, but had reminded them both how precious their time together was. They'd learned to fight productively and forgive quickly. They'd learned to support each other's dreams without losing themselves. They'd learned that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a practice, something you got better at with time and attention and grace. After dinner, while the grandparents supervised cleanup and the children played in the backyard, Marcus took Sarah's hand and led her to their favorite spot, the porch swing he'd installed on their first anniversary. Penny, for your thoughts, he said as they settled together, the sounds of family life surrounding them. I was thinking about that night at the hospital, when you first saw me with the twins. You mean when I made a complete fool of myself? You weren't a fool, you were overwhelmed, we both were. Sarah curled up against his side. I was thinking about how terrified I was that you'd try to take them away from me, and I was terrified you'd disappear with them again. Look at us now. Look at us now, Marcus agreed. 3 kids, 2 careers, 1 very full life. From the backyard, they could hear Oliver shrieking with laughter as Diego pushed him on the tire swing, while Isabella practiced her soccer moves on the grass. The grandparents had moved to the porch chairs, Marcus's mother knitting, while Sarah's father read the newspaper out loud to anyone who would listen. Any regrets? Sarah asked, echoing Elena's question from their wedding day. About what? Any of it. The divorce, the years apart, the complicated way we found our way back to each other. Marcus considered this, watching their children play in the golden evening light. You know what I regret? I regret that it took almost losing you to realize what I had. I regret the night I came home from Alaska and was too caught up in my own stuff to see that you needed me. Marcus, but I don't regret the journey, because look what it taught us, look who we became because of it. He squeezed her hand. We're better at this now, all of it. Marriage, parenting, being partners in every sense of the word. Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching Isabella show Oliver how to juggle the soccer ball. Eleanor asked me the same question at our wedding. I told her I had no regrets, and that was true then. It's even more true now. Why? Because if we hadn't made those mistakes, we might have stayed the people we were then. We might never have learned how to really talk to each other, how to put each other first, how to build something stronger than what we had before. Marcus nodded. Plus, if we hadn't divorced, we might never have had Oliver. True. Sarah smiled at the thought. Oliver had been conceived during a weekend getaway to celebrate their first wedding anniversary, a surprise that had delighted them both and completed their family in the most perfect way. Speaking of Oliver, Marcus said, did you see his latest report card? Straight A's again. That kid is going to end up running the world someday. As long as he remembers to invite us to the inauguration. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their life unfold in front of them. This was what they'd built together, not just a house or a family, but a whole world. A world where children felt safe to dream big, where love was expressed in soccer games and family dinners, and homework help and bedtime stories. Mom! Dad! Isabella called from the yard. Come settle an argument. What's the argument? Sarah called back. Diego says you can't score a goal in basketball, but I say you can if you kick the ball into the hoop. Marcus and Sarah looked at each other and burst out laughing. That's definitely our daughter, Marcus said. She gets her logical reasoning from you. She gets her determination from you. They got up to referee the latest Rivera family debate, but Sarah paused on the porch steps. Marcus. Yeah? Thank you. For what? Sarah gestured to everything around them. The house, the children, the grandparents arguing good-naturedly about the best way to load a dishwasher, the evidence of a life fully lived and deeply loved. For not giving up on us. For fighting for this even when I was too scared to fight for it myself. Marcus came back to her, cupping her face in his hands, the way he had on their wedding day, the way he had in a dozen moments over the past 10 years when words weren't enough. Sarah Rivera, I would fight for this every day for the rest of my life. I would choose you and this chaos and these beautiful children and this perfectly imperfect life over and over and over again, even when Isabella insists you can score goals in basketball. Especially then. He kissed her as their children called for them to hurry up, as the sun set over their backyard, as their parents laughed at some private joke, as their life continued in all its messy, wonderful, ordinary, extraordinary glory. Later that night, after the grandparents had gone home and the children were finally asleep, Sarah and Marcus sat in their bedroom, the same room they'd dreamed about in that first house photo, now filled with family pictures and Oliver's artwork, and Isabella's soccer trophies and Diego's collection of books. Good day, Marcus said, pulling Sarah against him. The best, she agreed. Tomorrow's going to be crazy. Oliver has his school presentation. Isabella has practice. Diego has that science project due. And I have the budget meeting, and you have the Portland call, Sarah finished. I wouldn't have it any other way. Really? Not even a quiet beach vacation, just the two of us? Sarah pretended to consider this. Well, maybe for our 15th anniversary. Deal, but I'm bringing pictures of the kids. Obviously. As they settled into sleep, Sarah thought about the woman she'd been 11 years ago. Scared, pregnant, convinced she had to choose between love and independence, between family and career, between security and dreams. That woman couldn't have imagined this life. This partnership where both people got to be fully themselves while building something bigger together. This love that was deep enough to weather mistakes and strong enough to grow stronger because of them. I love you, she whispered to Marcus in the dark. I love you too, he whispered back. See you in the morning. See you in the morning. It was a promise they'd kept for 10 years now, through sick children and work deadlines and family crises and ordinary Tuesdays. A promise to keep choosing each other, keep building together, keep showing up for the life they'd created. And tomorrow, they'd keep it again. Because some love stories don't end with happily ever after. The best ones end with see you in the morning, a promise to keep writing the story together one day at a time for as long as they both shall live.